And so you held on to it.
I held on to it.
Yeah.
I still didn't like come right out and say I'm going to be a poet or anything like that, because I also had been brought up in a very strong black community where it was just assumed if you got good grades, you were going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a teacher, or and be, you know, the credit to your race. And to be a credit to your race, you had to be one of those three things. So I entered college, University of Miami University of Ohio. I entered there thinking that I would be one of those things. And I changed my major about 6 times my first year. Kind of knew I wasn't going to be a doctor because I didn't like the sight of blood. And thought maybe a lawyer. That sounds, but it wasn't until I was a junior that I admitted to my parents that I wanted to be a poet. I kept gravitating over to the to the writers. And I finally declared English as my major because I had heard that you could be an English major and still be a lawyer. So my parents were happy, I thought. Another piece of serendipity, a piece of serendipity and a teacher that really influenced me. I was in an advanced composition class. It was a core curriculum at Miami University, so this is a class I had to take. And though I loved it. I was in this class when the professor got ill and they asked the fiction writing professor to take over. They figured fiction, composition,
Sure.
Close. And he came in and he said, we're going to write stories and you'll learn composition from that, because that's what I know. And so I was actually kind of catapulted into my first writing class. And I thought, you mean you can take courses in this? I can get a degree in this? And that's what started me on that path. And so I came home when I was a junior and told my mother I'm going to be a poet. I finally decided.
And what did she say?
She
That'd
said,
be encouraging.
well, she said, we were in the kitchen, and she said, you tell your father. And that's what she said.
What did he say?
It was really great, actually. I was terrified. But I went in and he was reading the paper, as we did every evening, from, you know, cover to cover. And I said I want to be a poet. And he stopped, put down his paper, swallowed. And then he said, well, I've never understood poetry. Don't be upset if I don't read it. And I took that as, well, as an expression of faith. I was happy, didn't blow, you know, say, what, are you kidding me? All? But I think it was an expression of faith. It's like, well, this is a path you want to go down. It's not one that I've ever, you know, looked at. So, but I still love you, you know, I'm gonna.
But he obviously loved language. You told me before we started that he was self-taught in German and Italian. And then as a young girl, he taught you German. So he was language conscious.
He was very language conscious, and he did, there were German books in the house, there were Italian books in the house, and he had taught himself German and Italian before going into the war, the Second World War, because he didn't know where he was going to be deployed. And later when I asked him, he said, well, I wanted to learn the language of the enemy, you know, it could come in handy. And so as a child, I saw those books on the shelves, and in fact, one of the German books was a book of poetry. A very beautiful volume of Schiller, a long poem called The Song of the Bell, and it had illustrations. And I would look through this book and think, I can't read this, I want to read this. So he was very conscious of language. And if my brother and I, my brother's 2 years older, and so we were the ones who were always the battering ram, I guess, in the family, kind of leading things. Whenever we asked him a question about something, he would go to the dictionary and say, well, let's look it up together. And then we'd spend about a half an hour or so, you know, looking up the etymology of a word. So he was very language conscious, it's true.